All right, so now that the season is concluded, we got to just jump straight into it. But the off-season business, we got to start talking about the 2025 season already. And one of the first and biggest decisions that is coming up for the Sounders, and I think this is what's going to set the tempo and what we might see as a possible big transfer window for the Sounders, is the contract decisions for players that contracts end this season. So in today's video, we're going to talk about these end of season roster decisions and who I think we should renew and who we should let walk. And for clarification, for all of you that don't totally understand the roster decisions, I'm not necessarily a guru or an expert on it. That's definitely more of Tom Bogert's expertise. But to put it in the most simplest terms possible that helps me understand it, if a player has an option on their deal, that means the club can just essentially trigger that option and they're automatically renewed. No going back and forth with renewing a new contract and salaries X, Y, and Z. But if a player's contract has expired, they have to go through that whole renegotiation phase of a new contract, salary, whatever it may be. So that's a more bigger decision if the club wants to do that. I hope that explains it well for you all that may not have understood what these options meant and why these are on certain players and why some players don't have them. The last thing I will say is, which is something I already brought up in the very start of this video, I think this stage for the Sounders is the most important part going into this offseason. Because if we don't see many players let go, let them walk, the harder it's going to be for the club to make signings. The more space we have in our roster, the more signings we can make. And two of these three players that are on this list is our DPs. And a DP is a player that can be paid whatever X amount. It's essentially the joker card for your roster. So take that information as you will, because in my opinion, the more players we're willing to let go here, the more possibility we have in the transfer market. And that's why I'm saying this is going to be a big indication if the Sounders are going to have a big offseason going into this massive 2025 FIFA Club World Cup that I've reiterated a gajillion times. And by the way, I will be doing a live stream this Thursday for the group stage draw, so make sure to be there so you can find out with me and we can all talk about our thoughts of the group the Sounders are drawn in for that tournament. First up is Rothrock. He has an option for 2025. He's one of the bright sparks this season. I would extend that option. Up next is Rusnak, probably the biggest and most controversial player to talk about on this list, and he's second on this list. He's one of our three designated players, was arguably our best player on the stat sheet this season and was one of his career high seasons, but in my opinion, I just wouldn't renew him. In the modern 2025 in MLS, if Albert Rusnak is one of your designated players, as I said, the designated player spot is like a joker card. You could sign anybody with that money. And I'd rather us risk it and try to sign a younger, higher potential player that could be a huge difference maker for us in big games, because one thing was for sure with Rusnak, he was not a big game player for us. He ghosted in literally every single big game that we had and can only show up in big games when there's a center back in goal. And as well, some of you might say, but what if you will take a lower deal for the team and not go as a designated player? Let's be honest here with ourselves. A player that just had a career high season, do you think he's going to be willing to take a pay cut? Probably not. But even if he is, he's probably at best is only going to go to a TAM. And again, a TAM is another spot in the roster that I just rather us give it to another new signing. I just wouldn't spend any more money on an aging 31-year-old that I just don't think is worth keeping anymore. If all of you remember back in 2015, Obafemi Martins was arguably our best player and was one of the best players the Sounders have ever had. Going into the 2016 season, we got a big offer for him. We sold him. We cut our losses and we're able to reinvest that money into arguably the greatest player, if not the greatest player in Sounders history in Ladero, and the rest is just history. In my opinion, we got to have some cojones, which I don't think we've had in the transfer market for ages. And I'm talking about you, Craig Weibel. A big cojones move for him would just be letting Albert Rusnak go. All you got to do is just say bye. You don't even have to do anything else. You sit Albert down and be like, you know what, Albert? That's it. We appreciate your time. See you later. That's all I'm asking for us to do. Open up a DP spot. So I'm going to say I would let Albert Rusnak walk. Next up is Yeimar, arguably our best player. I would take him for his option in 2025. Rui Diaz, it's already basically confirmed that he's not coming back, and nor would I want him to come back. And I don't want to say anything bad about Rui Diaz because he is probably the Sounders' greatest ever striker, and it's just unfortunate how things ended the last couple of years. We should have just sold him a year or two ago when he had some sort of value value, but instead we held him on for way too long and it just didn't end how you would like to see a club legend leave the club. Next is João Paulo. This one I'm 50-50 on. I've seen some people say, you know what, JP, he's getting older. He hasn't quite been the same since his ACL injury. He was probably the Sounders' best player back in 2021. With this Club World Cup coming up, I'm going to say keep because I think midfield depth is very, very important. But I do have a feeling the Sounders might let him walk. But for me, because we're playing in multiple competitions, Club World Cup, Open Cup, MLS, Leagues Cup, possibly the Champions League as well, depending on how things pan out for the MLS Cup final, I would keep JP for the experience and the depth. One thing I forgot to mention during the recording, so I'm just going to add this in post-production, is there is a good likelihood that we might see Obed Vargas leave at this offseason or midway through the season because he's a player that has warranted a lot of attention this past season for how good he's been playing, getting his first senior call-up to the Mexican national team. So there might be a handful of European teams and Liga MX teams that might be interested in signing him. And there might be some offers on the table that the Sounders cannot reject. So that would be another point on why I would want to keep João Paulo this season. Next up is Liao Chu. Fuck no, I would not keep him. We should have sold him when we had offers on the table from Brazilian clubs last year. And my goodness, Craig Waibel looks like an absolute idiot for not taking that money because he absolutely rotted on the bench. His whole Sounders career is carried by that one match against SKC. We should have just cut our losses, and kind of just goes back to the point I was making earlier. We just haven't had any cojones in the transfer market. We haven't taken like any risks, and Liao Chu is a prime example of that. Next is Dylan Tevez. I would extend his option. Next is Nathan. He was good for us in the playoffs. He stepped up when he needed to, but he is on fairly high wages. I'm 50-50 on it, but just to free up wages, and I wouldn't mind us just give his spot up to Stewart, who is way younger and has more potential. I would cut our losses and let Nathan walk. Next up is Reed. I would definitely use his option for 2025, so I would keep him. Sota, super young, haven't seen him play much. I would use his option for 2025. Jacob Castro has gotten very high praise from Brian Schmetzer for his performances on Tacoma Defiance. I would keep him too. Use his option for 2025. Berdilio Rodriguez has been riddled with injuries, but hopefully with the exit of Musovski, Berdilio can finally have that season we were hoping for this year, where he's kind of like that second to third string option striker. He's still relatively young, but when he did get his chance, he did come back from injury. He was a bright spark for the Tacoma Defiance, so I would definitely give him that option, see what happens from there. Next is John Bell. Very much an unsung hero this season. Can fill any position in the back line. So definitely I would keep him for depth, and he was very solid for us this year. So to go over it all again, I would keep everybody except for Rusnak, Rui Diaz, Liao Chu, and Nathan. Just 4 players, but 2 of them being DP players. And 2 other players that are taking up fairly high wages that aren't really necessary for the squad. And I think if you let go of these 4 guys, you're going to free up a lot of space in the wage book and give us a lot of opportunity in the transfer market, because 2 open DP spots would be huge. Yes, it would be difficult to fill, don't get me wrong, but for the fact we haven't splashed any money for 3 straight summer transfer windows, it needs to be done going into this Club World Cup. When looking at the Galaxy, for example, they filled up 2 major spots, which I believe are DP spots, with Peck and Paintsel, and look where they are. They have arguably one of the best, if not the best offense in MLS because they took risks, and that's what I want to see us do. And if you get rid of those 4 guys, you have the wiggle room. No more excuse of being like, oh, our roster doesn't really have any room for us to buy anybody, or this excuse, that excuse. If you have the cojones, Weibel, and you want space to be able to make big signings, you got to make the big decisions here when you sit down with these players. But boys and girls, that's just my opinion. You guys got to let me know in the comments down below, what is your guys' opinion? Who would you guys keep or let go of from these upcoming roster decisions? This video might be out as soon as those roster decisions have been made. I've heard they're going to be quick decisions, so I don't know exactly when these will be made, but I would not be surprised if it happens in the next coming days. So that's why I wanted to make sure to get this video out ASAP as soon as that Galaxy game ended. Don't forget, I will be going live for the Club World Cup draw on Thursday at 9:45 a.m. So make sure to be there. But boys and girls, I hope you'll have a lovely day.